I'm Vicki Hogarth, and welcome to Southwest Magazine. I'm joined today by the MP of New Brunswick Southwest, John Williamson. Thank you for being here today.
It's nice to be back again. We have a recess from Parliament. What are we? The middle of March. So it's nice to be back because we're gearing up for another couple of weeks, and then home for Easter, and then after that, pretty much straight through to the end of June. So we're getting busy, and as your viewers can see, things are getting loud in Parliament.
And we have a lot to talk about today, but I wanted to first talk about something that will take effect April 1st. It is an increase in beer and spirit prices. Can you give everyone an idea of what to expect in just the coming weeks?
Yeah, sure. So on April the 1st, and this is no April Fool's joke, there is a regular tax increase that is coming on booze, beer, spirits. That is again going to drive up the price of alcohol. So, for example, a 12-pack of beer will go up by a little less than a dollar. And what's really irritating, and I think turns a lot of people off about this, is that this price increase goes up every single year, regardless of economic factors, regardless of how well manufacturers are doing profits. It's just a tax increase. And what has upset a lot of members of Parliament is this is what we call the escalator tax. Parliament on tax bills are required to approve a tax increase every single year. A number of years ago, the Liberals broke with convention and put in place this escalator tax, mandating that it would increase every single year. And this is just another tax that hits consumers. Of course, this tax was put in place before the current inflationary environment we're in, but it does drive up prices. It makes it more hard. It makes it more expensive for people to enjoy a beer in the summertime or buy a bottle of spirits. And I mean, right now in this country, spirits, for example, the tax markup is 80 to 90% of the price of a bottle of gin, a bottle of vodka. We're already heavily taxed on this product, and along come the Liberals, and they just increase this tax along with other taxes like the carbon tax and other taxes out there, just making life more difficult for Canadians. So, we think it's wrong to have tax policy that just goes up every single year without Parliament voting on it. We've said in government we would repeal it to bring down prices. And again, it's a product that's already overtaxed. So it's the kind of thing that if you don't drink, will drive you to drink. But if you're going to do so, buy your beer, your spirits before April 1st to get a little bit of a break.
I think too, when you live in a border community, it's so easy to compare prices when you go across the border. You were mentioning to me before we started filming today, though, that, and I didn't think about this aspect of it, but what it does to a major exporter such as Moosehead.
So Moosehead Brewery is the largest Canadian-owned brewery in the country. Now, most Canadians aren't familiar with Moosehead. It's a New Brunswick prize. I think it's a great beer, but they sell most of their beer into the United States. And this tax is particularly harmful on a company like Moosehead, Canadian-owned, Canadian jobs, because every year, because of this Liberal escalator tax, the taxes go up on their product. They have to pay it, even if they're selling into the U.S. market. And every year, Moosehead beer becomes more expensive compared to all the competitors in the United States, which just makes it harder for Moosehead to sell, which means it's harder for them to reinvest in their operations, to expand their operation, and to give their workers a pay raise. So this is, we should be coming up with tax policy in this country that allows our exporters, whether it's beer or manufacturing or seafood, to sell more overseas and not penalize them with automatic regular tax increases that have nothing to do with their bottom line. It makes it harder for them to operate. The smartest thing Moosehead could do would be to move their operations into Maine. Their taxes would fall. They'd be in the market they sell a lot of beer to, and they could just import it back into Canada and the markets they serve, like New Brunswick. Now, it's a patriotic Canadian-owned country. They're not going to do that. They're trying to deal with this tax as best they can. But again, the solution is to bring down taxes on Canadian companies and not punish them. So this tax hurts business and it hurts consumers as well.
And I suppose another reason to care particularly about Moosehead is that as we've seen, the federal riding will be changing in the near future from New Brunswick Southwest to New Brunswick from New Brunswick Southwest St. Croix?
St. Croix, St. John. Now,
St. Croix,
the name has it, we're still having a little arm wrestle in Parliament now. The Procedure and House Affairs Committee accepted my recommendation to keep the name New Brunswick Southwest.
Okay.
That recommendation will eventually be submitted to the New Brunswick commissioners, and they will decide. So we'll see. I hope we keep the name New Brunswick Southwest because I think it reflects the entire riding from Charlotte County to Sussex, of which St. John West will be part of. Mm-hmm. But look, if it doesn't, it's just a name at the end of the day as well. I'm gonna work hard for all the constituents. But yes, St. John West, we're on track that they will join this big riding likely after the next election.
Which means Moosehead.
Which means, sorry, the point is Moosehead, yes. And Moosehead Brewery is in St. John West, so will be an area that I represent. Now, I'd still be passionate about Moosehead and as a consumer anyway, but it's just, I've already had a chance to sit down with the Moosehead team and talk about this. It's an issue I've dealt with even long before the riding change, but I met with them recently about it because I know it's one that's hurting their bottom line and making it harder for them to invest in their product and to grow.
Now, another headline I'm sure Canadians have seen a lot of in the last couple weeks is regarding foreign interference in Canadian elections. I'd love to just get your perspective on what exactly is happening. I know this week Trudeau appointed a new position altogether, David Johnston, and he will be in charge of investigating interference, but I'd love you to shed some light on exactly what we think has happened and where we're at.
So there are more and more reports coming out that the Communist Party in mainland China interfered with the 2021 election and the 2019 election. And there's a story out today that they also interfered in the mayor's race in Vancouver as well. That's breaking today in terms of news. My view is, and the view of the opposition parties in general, is we need an independent review of what happened. For some reason, the Prime Minister has been extremely defensive on this topic. He has at first said a public inquiry was not needed, but I think as the news continued, more and more Canadians felt that was the wrong approach. Something happened, and we need to figure out how it happened, who benefited, and what can be done to prevent it in the future. And the problem with the Prime Minister, the reports are the Communist Party wanted two things. They wanted to knock out and defeat conservative members of Parliament that had been critical of China, which they did, particularly out of British Columbia and one in Toronto. And they also wanted a liberal government to be elected with a minority. So it appears from these intelligence reports, it was mission accomplished. They were successful. Now, I'm not arguing that the last election wasn't fair and open, but there were ridings that were unduly influenced by what appears to be Communist Party propaganda that took out some members of Parliament. Now, and the Prime Minister resting on, well, it didn't change the overall results. So whether these 4, 6, whatever the candidates were that won or lost, the results would have been the same. Well, that's correct, but that's beside the point. If we don't do something about this interference, it's going to get worse. So along comes this idea when the public blowback is such that we need a review, and the media pressure in Ottawa was going up and up and up. The Prime Minister creates this like special rapporteur who is not going to investigate, but is just going to advise the Prime Minister if there should be a public review, or some kind of, maybe not public, but some kind of review and investigation. But this is just buying time. I mean, that's the job for the Prime Minister. Nothing is preventing the Prime Minister and the government from saying we need a proper inquiry to review this. So this is a problem. And then the person that they nominated is problematic. David Johnston is a good man, and he's a former Governor General. But he is a personal friend of the Prime Minister. He's a personal friend of the Trudeau family, and he also sits on the board of the Trudeau Foundation. This is not someone who is independent from the government, and his appointment raises all kinds of questions. He's also been very cozy with China. He visited as Governor General, which is fine, but he referred to things like being in China as like coming home or being home. This is not someone who is really at arm's length from the federal government and has a deep relationship with mainland China. It is a problem, and I think when Parliament goes back next week, it is going to explode again, because this is more cover from the Prime Minister when we need to get to the bottom of this and not just try to sweep it under the rug. This is not like any other scandal that involves overspending or some infraction. This goes to the core of our democracy, and if one member of Parliament was defeated because a foreign government interfered, that is one too many, and we're now realizing that in fact a number of MPs could have been defeated because of interference. And look, even if I'm overstating it, there is something here. It needs to be investigated, and a friend of Justin Trudeau is not the person to do it. We need someone. I actually think, and again, this has been echoed by others, the four parties do work together in Parliament on a number of issues. A shortlist should be drawn up where all opposition members say, we can agree with these 6, 7, and let the Prime Minister pick one of those names that the official opposition, the Bloc leader, and the NDP leader have all signed off on. But Trudeau's not done that. Instead, he's turned to someone who is a director of the Trudeau Foundation. I mean, that is just so over the top. It's something you would find in a movie on kind of spies. But it should not have happened in the government of Canada.
I'm sure when Canadians, and myself included, hear the words foreign interference, it's hard to imagine exactly what it would be. It seems as if that would almost be a full team's job. You would need quite an extensive tech team to look into. If we're looking at assaults on character online or those kind of campaigns, we're looking at it in terms of that sort of interference, right?
It would, exactly. It would be vast and sweeping, and it would have to be in order to understand how technology is being misused, how actors are funneling money, because part of this involves just cold hard cash as well. The allegation is the Communist Party provided money to don't forget it's as many as 11 federal candidates. We don't know how. Well, again, the allegation is we have one name of an individual who the Chinese diplomats in Toronto aided. So there's one name to the 11. So there's potentially a number of individuals sitting in Parliament who are there because the Chinese government helped them, and we increasingly believe, and I think it's clear looking at the evidence, that some Conservative members of Parliament were defeated, particularly on the West Coast, the Vancouver area. And
maybe perhaps this is a naive question, but would those people be aware that they were aided in this way?
Well, that's a great question, and why disclosure is so important, because in England, Westminster had the same problem where a number of MPs received money. And that's why we have public disclosure of all our donations. And the British dealt with it by full transparency. They opened it up. And MPs were given the opportunity to account for it. And most of them said, well, look, I raise tens of thousands of dollars. I don't know where every donation for $1,000 comes from. And these explanations were believable in most cases. And the members stayed on because they were seen as being honest. They were known by their colleagues. So the problem was dealt with, and the spotlight turned on the donors, and the British tightened the rules. In this country, Trudeau is trying to sweep it under the rug. So instead of, look, I would like to know who these 11 are. Well, 10 now. We know who one is. I mean, potentially 2 of them are Conservative MPs. I would like to know what happened, and was it a question of foreign agents using the laws, subverting the laws to get money into campaigns? Which again is illegal, but members might not be aware of that? Or was it a question they were in cahoots, which is even more serious because now you've got foreign actors misbehaving, and as well as potentially candidates and even members of parliament who worked for the foreign agent to become elected. This is how serious this is, and if we don't do anything about it, it's just going to get worse because people, if there are no consequences, they will continue on with behavior that's worked in the past. And China has become more aggressive and has become more critical of Canada, and like Australia and like in Britain, they're trying to influence outcomes of elections now, and it's very, very serious.
Well, it sounds like an issue we'll have more information on next time we sit down too, and we'll be following closely. It seems like it's a new reality in a lot of ways. At first, it seemed like we were watching that happen in the U.S., but now it's
which is why we can't be kind of relaxed about it. We can't just say, well, that it didn't affect the outcome of the election. Liberals are still going to win. They might have had a few less seats. We can't take that approach. And I'll contrast it with just the sign of Russian interference in the U.S. election. Alarm bells. There were investigations in the United States, and that was the right thing to do. But the same standard should be held in this country, where there is even more evidence, more documents coming from the security establishment indicating that this is not only a problem, because at first it was just 2019, then it was 2021, and today we find out it's now even going into municipal elections as well.
Well, I'll pivot very ungracefully to talk about next. I guess it relates in some ways to Bill C-11 and where we're at now with...
So the Bill C-11, this is the bill that the Liberals have brought forward, which has been debated loudly and for some time in Parliament. There's a lot in this bill. It affects things like community television in a way that I don't think a lot of people have object to. It also deals with social media and the big tech companies, their relationship with traditional media. And that's a debate that's ongoing, and really is a debate also between companies as well. But at the core of the opposition to C-11 is, and this is my large objection to the bill, as well as the Conservative Party, is that it is going to give CRTC bureaucrats the ability to control what Canadians can find and see on their social media, their Facebook, their Twitter, their TikTok, you name it. And it'll do that by controlling the algorithms. And that's what makes this particularly insidious is that Canadians could, or we might not know how information is being controlled. It's a bill that if it does pass, we will repeal. But it's also a bill that's problematic because the Liberals have said this is not about Canadians that generate content. And so we've been fighting to make that explicit in the bill. We were not successful. It passed, went to the Senate. Now the Senate is largely appointed by Justin Trudeau's Liberals. They came back with the exact same amendment we wanted to exclude Canadians that produce content that just want to be able to escape the control of the CRTC. The Liberals have indicated they're not going to accept that amendment from their own senators. So this is a bill that we think is a vast overreach. While I can point to some parts of the bill that if we were to separate it out, I could vote for. But the overarching principle of this bill is to kind of control the news that Canadians see. And I think in an open and democratic society, that is not where we want to be going as a country, to give bureaucrats the ability to decide that this is newsworthy, this is not newsworthy. And probably the biggest example of how they can get it wrong is the story and how the media handled the Wuhan lab leak. When that was first reported, this was big tech working with officials in the United States to suppress that, to literally suppress it. And now we're proposing in this country to not give big tech the ability to do that, but to give the government of Canada the ability to decide what is accurate news and what is not accurate news. That is chilling and really is not something that should stand in a democratic country.
I was saying to you before that one thing I wish in the future is that we would make algorithms available for everyone to see, whether it's Google, Facebook, transparency with something like.
So I agree with that. I agree with that. I don't think government should have the power to set those kind of. Government should not have the ability to censor our social media pages, but I also think. Big tech social media companies should be obliged to report how they're controlling what individuals see, what they're advancing, what they're suppressing. Because again, even what we've seen coming out of COVID-19 in the United States, there were some prominent doctors and individuals who were suppressed because they took a different opinion. And we're seeing now in hindsight, not only was that wrong, we're also seeing how that has done more to erode confidence in government and in public health officials than anything some far left or some far right group could do that has no real kind of influence. But when it's coming from large institutions in this country, the United States, that we trust, and we see that trust was not deserved, it gives, I think, a lot of people pause, and rightly so.
Now another bill.
I would say, like I've always felt, just to wrap up on this, the best way to deal with a bad idea or something that is false is to expose it to scrutiny, expose it to the light. Don't try to cover it up and suppress it. It will, because it will continue to be there. But expose it to critical thinking, to a debate, and that's how I think we as a country move ahead.
Another bill that we've been following is Bill C-21 with regards to guns. I know there's a bit of an update from last time.
Yes, now you're talking about a local issue.
Yes.
This is so C-21 is the government's so-called gun control legislation. It literally went off the rails a number of months ago when the government tabled at the last minute, after committees had heard from witnesses, changes that would prohibit, ban about 1,500 or so types of long guns that are used for hunting, and it was a surprise. It was something the government said they would never do, and there was so much opposition, first by conservative voters and hunters in particular. Then it spread to First Nation communities as well, who thought the bill was wrong. And then in Parliament, the Bloc Québécois and the NDP joined our opposition. So suddenly Liberals had a problem. They couldn't even pass it in Parliament despite their coalition with the NDP. So the Liberals retreated, but it's, I think, a tactical retreat. If Mr. Trudeau ever gets a majority government again, I mean, he has said that he believes some of these guns need to be outlawed, even though they're used for hunting. They're used responsibly and legally. There are exceptions. Crime does happen, but the solution is not to turn legal gun owners into criminals. It is to go after criminals, to stop the gun smuggling that's coming into this country, and to go after gangs and violence where it happens. It's not by going after farmers and duck hunters, and that has been the Liberal approach. So a small victory here. But it's one that I think revealed the true intent of the Liberal government.
A half hour goes by very fast when you're here, and I know we only have a few minutes left, but I really wanted to talk about, last time you were here, we talked about medical assistance in dying, and how that could potentially be expanded to mental illness, and since then I've actually seen the Fifth Estate did a full half hour on this, and fears that Canadians are having, or even some Canadians who have used medical assistance in dying when it, in controversial scenarios. What is the latest on that? I know that there's... So again, a delay, and we call. I mean, this is a good thing. The government was set to allow Canadians who were suffering from mental health illness, mental health crisis, to opt for assisted suicide. I think they completely misread the goodwill of Canadians to be compassionate to others. I mean, the whole
medical assistance in death, assisted suicide. The premise was if you're near death and you're suffering, this should be an option. But the barn doors have been blown off. I mean, look, there are some who are even advocating in the advocates that it could even apply to not only so-called mature minors, but even include the first year after a baby is born. I mean, this is ghoulish stuff. But to the question you're talking about, even the idea of extending it to mental health is fraught with danger. First, because it's not something that's going to kill you. It's not a physical ailment, and people get better all the time. Not everyone, but the idea that we're going to open the door to individuals when they're in a dark place and the state is going to help to kill them, I think is way too far for most Canadians. So the government has another retreat. They've delayed it for a year. We have since put in a bill before Parliament that will remove that altogether from legislation, from ever taking effect. Our view is assisted suicide should be limited and focused on people who are ill and dying, and not be opened up, because we're already seeing the downside where Veterans Affairs officials are offering MAID to veterans who are in a tough spot. We're hearing stories of people going into food to get food, and they're asking about can they get MAID. Like, these are some tough cases. So we want this to be reserved for the few, and not for it to be seen as a escape clause because other government policies are failing. We want our veterans to be treated compassionately, and we want people that are hurting economically to get back on their feet, and not not send the signal that assisted death is the way out, because it's permanent, and it's again, I think it's really harmful as a country to go down this path. It's not an approach you take that is compassionate, or one where you're extending a helping hand. It really closes off options, and it is dangerous. So it's ongoing. Again, I think the government overreached. Good for them for delaying it a year, but it should be consigned altogether and just abandoned, because it is. I mean, even as you said, more and more people are speaking out about it. Mental health advocates and groups don't advocate it as well, because they recognize, people's mental health can worsen, but then it can get better as well. So,
and perhaps it could add to a stigma that could encourage people that don't see it as something.
Well, and that's it. Like, there was a ghoulish report out of Parliament that looked at assisted death and how it could save the healthcare system money. I mean, are these the options we want to be putting forward, people? We're a rich country. I want people to get the healthcare when they need it, and I never want to send the signal as a lawmaker that, well, some lives should be ended because it's going to cost the system too much. These are fellow Canadians. They deserve the best care we can afford, and that includes when people are elderly as well. So.
Well, I look forward to an update again when you are back in a month or two.
I hope more positive, but I look forward to it as well, and I appreciate you having me in.
My guest today has been John Williamson, MP for New Brunswick Southwest. I'm Vicki Hogarth. Thank you for watching Southwest Magazine.
Southwest Magazine is a news and public affairs production of CHCO Television.